Before she disappeared, Dorothy Jane Scott already knew someone was watching her. A man called her at work, described exactly what she was wearing that day, and he was never wrong. By the spring of 1980, she had been living with that fear for months. And on the night she vanished, she wasn't doing anything reckless. She was walking toward a parking structure to bring her car around for a coworker who couldn't walk on his own. That's where this story starts. Not with a woman in danger taking a risk, but a woman in danger doing something kind. Dorothy was 32, a single mother raising her 4-year-old son, Sean, in Stanton, California, a small city not far from her parents in Anaheim. She worked as a secretary for 2 jointly owned Anaheim shops. The people who knew her described her the same way, again and again. Quiet, home-loving, devoted to her son, uninterested in drama of any kind. None of that mattered to the man on the phone. The calls started sometime in early 1980. At first, he sounded almost infatuated, telling Dorothy she was beautiful, asking her out, refusing to give his name, hanging up fast. Then the calls turned. He told her he knew where she lived. He said he would hurt her. And then he proved something worse than a threat. He knew things a stranger shouldn't know. What she'd worn that morning, where she'd been the day before. Once, he told her to walk outside, and on her windshield sat a single rose, already dead. Dorothy told her mother, the voice sometimes sounded familiar, like someone she should be able to place. She never could. Whoever was calling wasn't guessing about her life. He was watching it. She wasn't quiet about any of it. Dorothy told her coworkers about the calls. She told her mother. The fear was documented, witnessed, real to everyone around her, which matters, because whatever happened next did not come out of nowhere. It came after months of warning that nobody, including Dorothy, knew how to stop. In 1980, there was no such thing as a stalking law anywhere in the United States. A man could call a woman for months, threaten her life, leave a dead flower on her windshield, and there was nothing police could charge him with. Because nothing had technically happened yet. California wouldn't pass the nation's first stalking law until 1990, a full decade after Dorothy vanished. Whatever protection that law offered came too late for her. In her final week, Dorothy reportedly began taking self-defense classes and was considering buying a handgun for her purse. She never got the chance to use either. On the evening of May 28, 1980, Dorothy was at a staff meeting when a coworker, Conrad Bostron, started feeling seriously ill. She noticed a mark on his arm, a black widow spider bite, doctors later confirmed. She drove him to UC Irvine Medical Center in Orange, along with another coworker, Pam Head. Doctors treated Conrad, and close to midnight, as the 3 of them got ready to leave, Dorothy offered to walk ahead and bring the car around so he wouldn't have to. She walked into the parking structure. And from that point on, almost everything about this case becomes a question mark. A few minutes later, Pam and Conrad saw headlights coming toward them, fast. It was Dorothy's white Toyota station wagon. But the headlights were too bright for either of them to see who was behind the wheel. The car sped past them and out of the lot. They assumed Dorothy had been called away, maybe something involving Sean. It was the only explanation that made sense at the time. It wasn't true. Hours passed with no word. When Pam and Conrad couldn't reach her, they called Dorothy's parents, then the police, who, by their own account, weren't especially alarmed at first. An adult missing for a few hours didn't sound like an emergency. It would not stay that way for long. Around 5 in the morning, police in Santa Ana found Dorothy's station wagon on fire in an alley, her purse and belongings gone with her. The fire had started in the passenger seat, and whatever evidence it might have held burned along with it. There's one detail investigators wouldn't uncover for another 4 years. The watch Dorothy was wearing that night had stopped at 12:30 in the morning. Roughly an hour after, Pam and Conrad watched her car speed away from the hospital. It's the closest thing to a timestamp this case has ever had. About a week after she vanished, her parents' phone rang. A man's voice said only 2 words, "I've got her," and hung up. That was the first of many calls. For the next 4 years, the same man called the Scott household almost every Wednesday afternoon, almost always when Dorothy's mother, Vera, happened to be home alone. Sometimes he said Dorothy was alive and with him. Sometimes he said he'd already killed her. The calls never lasted long enough for anyone to trace them. Vera and Jacob Scott refused to change their phone number, holding on to the hope that their daughter might someday be allowed to speak to them. She never was. In June 1980, after the Orange County Register published a story about Dorothy's disappearance, a man called the newsroom and told an editor he had killed her, that she'd been his, and that he believed she'd betrayed him. On its own, a call like that could have come from anyone looking for attention. What made investigators take it seriously was what came next. The caller knew about the Black Widow bite that sent Conrad to the hospital. And he knew that Dorothy had changed the scarf she was wearing from black to red before she arrived that night. Neither detail had been printed anywhere. He knew because he had been close enough to see it happen. But the same caller also said something that didn't hold up. He claimed Dorothy had phoned him from the hospital that night. Pam Head, who says she never left Dorothy's side, insisted no call was ever made. It's a small crack in an otherwise chillingly accurate confession. And more than 4 decades later, nobody has ever explained what it means. Was he lying to sound more in control than he really was? Or does it point to something about that night that investigators still don't fully understand? 4 more years went by. The Wednesday calls kept coming. The Scott family kept their line open and kept waiting. Then, on August 6, 1984, a construction foreman named Jesse Loza was clearing a site near Eucalyptus Drive in the hills of northeast Anaheim when, just after 7 in the morning, he found a human skull. Scattered around it, across a radius of roughly 25 feet, consistent with animal activity over a long stretch of time, were more bones. Nearby lay the remains of a dog. And among everything else, investigators recovered a turquoise ring and a watch. The same watch that had stopped at 12:30 in the morning 4 years earlier, in the hour after she was last seen alive. 8 days later, dental records confirmed what the ring and the watch already suggested. It was Dorothy. An autopsy could not determine how she had died. Years of exposure to the elements, combined with whatever the fire in that Santa Ana alley had already destroyed, left investigators with almost nothing else to work from. After news of the discovery became public, the calls to the Scott house started again. This time, police had recording equipment in place. It made no difference. The caller still refused to stay on the line long enough to be traced, and he was never identified. Here is what investigators can say with confidence. Dorothy Jane Scott was taken from a hospital parking structure just before midnight on May 28, 1980. Her car was driven away and set on fire within the hour. Her remains were found 4 years later in the hills of Anaheim. A man who appears to have stalked her for months called a newspaper and then called her family over and over, describing details that only someone close to the crime could have known. Here is what they still can't say: who he was, how he knew her, and why he fixated on her specifically. Why, of all the ways this could have ended, he chose to keep calling a grieving mother nearly every Wednesday for 4 years. And whether the man who confessed to a newsroom in the summer of 1980 is the same man whose voice eventually went silent, or whether he is still out there somewhere, decades older, carrying a secret he was never made to answer for. Dorothy Jane Scott spent the last hour of her freedom helping a coworker get to a hospital. She spent the months before that trying to convince the people around her that a stranger really was watching her as closely as it felt. She was right about all of it. She was right that he was close. She was right that he was dangerous. And she was right, in the end, that nobody was going to stop him before he acted, because in 1980, there was no law built to protect a woman from a man who hadn't touched her yet. More than 4 decades later, the Orange County Sheriff's Department Homicide Task Force still lists her case as open, still hoping that someone, somewhere, finally says something more than the 2 words that started all of this: "I've got her." If you know anything about the disappearance or murder of Dorothy Jane Scott, the Orange County Sheriff's Department Homicide Task Force can be reached at 714-647-7000. If cases like this, the ones where someone is telling everyone they're scared and no one can stop what happens next, are the ones that stay with you, subscribe. There's another one waiting.